can marry my daughter looking like that. I told you my father would come. You will address me with respect.
The church burst into laughter before the bride even reached the altar. "Go on, Daniel," Cyrus Bell shouted, waving foreclosure papers in the air. "Marry her fast. You can lose your wife and your farm on the same day." Daniel Reed stood frozen in his dead father's suit, staring at the woman walking toward him in white. And for one terrifying second, he realized this wedding might be the cruelest trap of his life. If you've ever loved someone so deeply that losing them felt survivable, until the moment you found out they might never have been yours at all, then stay with this story. Because what happened that day didn't just shock a town. It exposed the kind of evil people laugh at, until it comes for them too. Elena kept walking. That was the strange part. Even with the whole church whispering, even with Cyrus Bell grinning like a man who had already won, even with Daniel standing there looking like a poor joke in polished old boots, Elena never slowed down. Her dress was simple. No diamonds, no rich girl parade, no delicate performance. Just white fabric, trembling hands, and eyes locked on Daniel like he was the only thing in the room keeping her from falling apart. Daniel swallowed hard. The church was packed. Farmers, shop owners, women who brought pies to funerals and gossip to everything else. Men who called cruelty honesty because it made them feel less ashamed of enjoying it. Daniel heard them. "She's too pretty for him. This won't last a month. Poor boy probably thinks this is love." Grant Bell, Cyrus's son, had his phone out already, filming. Elena reached the altar. She took Daniel's hand. Her fingers were cold enough to scare him. "You okay?" he whispered. "No," she whispered back, and forced a tiny smile that nearly broke him. "But I'm here." The pastor cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered..." "Gathered for what?" Cyrus barked from the front pew. "A miracle or a funeral?" Laughter again. Daniel's face tightened, but Elena turned and looked at Cyrus with that dangerous stillness only certain women have. The kind that says they are one insult away from setting the whole room on fire and not apologizing. "You've spent 20 years trying to own every desperate family in this county," she said calmly. "Maybe don't talk during sacred moments. It makes hell sound closer." A few people gasped. Grant lowered his phone. Cyrus smiled wider, but Daniel saw the flash in his eyes. Men like Cyrus never feared fists first. They feared exposure. Still, Daniel's stomach stayed twisted. Because Cyrus wasn't just some loudmouth neighbor. He held Daniel's debt. The farm Daniel's father had died protecting. The land Daniel's mother still walked at sunset, touching fence posts like prayer beads. The soil Daniel had bled into through droughts, storms, and years so lean even the dogs stopped hoping near supper. By sunset, if the debt wasn't paid, the farm was gone. And Elena knew that. The pastor tried again. "If anyone objects to this union..." A sound rolled in from outside. Engines. Low. Smooth. Expensive. At first, people frowned. Then the church windows began flashing with reflections. Black paint. Chrome. Glass. Heads turned. Children stood on the pews. One by one, luxury cars swept onto the dirt road outside the church. So many they seemed unreal in that poor corner of the county. Sedans, SUVs. A black convoy stretching past the cemetery fence, glittering under the afternoon sun, like money itself had decided to make an entrance. 20 cars. The whole church went silent. Men in dark suits stepped out first. Then drivers moved in formation to open doors. The last car stopped. Elena stopped breathing. Daniel felt her hand tighten until it hurt. The rear door opened. A tall man stepped out in a charcoal coat, silver at the temples, face cut from old power and expensive restraint. Victor Beaumont, Elena's father. The church changed shape in that second. Laughter vanished. Whispers died. Even Cyrus Bell sat up straighter. Daniel had never met Victor Beaumont, but he knew exactly who he was. Everybody did. Shipping, energy, hotels, real estate, politics. The kind of man who could destroy a county with a phone call and never have to raise his voice. And now that man was walking toward Daniel's wedding. Elena's lips parted. "No," she whispered. Daniel turned to her. "You didn't tell him?" "I didn't tell anyone." Victor entered the church. No smile, no greeting, no apology for arriving like judgment with a motorcade. His eyes found Elena first. Not Daniel, not the crowd, not the altar. Just his daughter. And Daniel saw something in Elena he had never fully seen before. Not anger. Old hurt. The kind that starts in childhood and hardens into elegance, because crying in rich houses is often treated like a lack of discipline. Victor stopped a few feet from the altar. "You're late," Elena said. Victor looked at her for a long second. "I came as soon as I confirmed it was true." "And what part needed confirming?" she shot back. "That I disobeyed you? Or that I chose someone without money?" A ripple moved through the room. Then Victor turned to Daniel. His eyes were cool, intelligent, unreadable. "This ceremony should not continue," he said. The church leaned in. Daniel felt heat rise into his neck. "You don't get to decide that." "No," Victor said, "not even when my daughter has not told you who she really is." Daniel looked at Elena. She went pale. That was the moment fear truly arrived. "Elena," he said. Her hand slipped from his. Victor reached into his coat and removed a sealed folder. "6 months ago," he said evenly, "my daughter came to this county under a different name as part of a private acquisition project." Daniel stared at him. "No. No." Victor opened the file. "She was sent here to convince Daniel Reed to sell his farm." The church exploded. Daniel didn't hear most of it, only the roaring in his own ears. He turned slowly toward Elena. She was crying already. "Tell him," Victor said. Her lips trembled. "My name wasn't Elena when I met you." Daniel stepped back. "It was Elle," she whispered. "I used my middle name." The room felt suddenly too bright. The first day she'd shown up by the fence, stranded with a broken car. The questions about boundaries, water access, drainage, road entry, the East Field. He had thought she was curious because she cared. "So that day on the road," he said, voice flat and awful. She nodded once. "It wasn't an accident." Something inside him tore quietly. He laughed, but there was no humor in it,
only disbelief. You came to buy my land. At first, Cyrus Bell clapped loudly from the pews. There it is! Daniel never took his eyes off her. At first, he repeated. Tears slid down Elena's face. I came with maps, contracts, and a deadline. I came thinking this was just acreage and numbers. And me? Her eyes shattered. I didn't know you yet. That hurt more than the lie, because it was honest. The church had become a living creature now, gossip breathing, judgment leaning, people thrilled by the destruction unfolding in front of them. Daniel couldn't feel his hands. Why stay? He asked. She looked at him with the helplessness of someone about to confess the one truth that arrives too late to save them. Because the first night I stepped into your kitchen, your mother apologized for the cheap plates like she was embarrassed to feed me. And you smiled at her like she'd set down gold. Daniel's jaw tensed. Elena took a shaky breath. You gave me soup when you barely had enough. You worked in the rain so your mother's medicine wouldn't be late. You carried a calf into the house because it was too cold in the barn. You made room for me before you ever knew what I was. Stop, Daniel said quietly. But she had crossed the point where silence could save her. I had spent my whole life around people who measured worth by what they could extract.
Then I met you, and you had almost nothing. And still, you were the first person who ever made me feel like being cared for didn't need to be earned. The church was silent again. Daniel's throat burned. You lied to me every day. I know. You let me tell you things I never told anyone. I know. You let me love you. That one nearly dropped her. I didn't plan that, she whispered. He shook his head, hurt turning colder. That doesn't matter. Victor closed the file. It matters enough, he said, that this wedding ends now. Daniel looked at him with sudden rage. You came here to humiliate her or me? Victor didn't flinch. I came because truth told late becomes poison. Cyrus stood again. Speaking of poison, the farm debt matures tonight, so whatever romance is left in the room, I suggest you enjoy it quickly. He held up the foreclosure packet. Daniel wanted to hit him, wanted to hit Victor, wanted to walk out, wanted to wake up. Instead, he just stared at Elena. Was any of it real? He asked. That question hurt her more than the accusations. Yes, she said instantly. Everything after I met you was real. After? Daniel whispered. That word is going to kill me. He walked away from the altar. She reached for him. He pulled back, not violently, just enough. But sometimes a gentle recoil hurts worse than a slap, because it says love is still there, just no longer safe. Outside, Daniel got into his truck and drove home without remembering the road. He found his mother, Ruth, sitting on the porch, cardigan buttoned wrong, hair thin and loose in the wind. She smiled when she saw him. Then she saw his face. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered. He sat beside her and stared at the fields. She lied to me. Ruth didn't ask who. She simply rested her hand over his, like mothers do, when words would only humiliate pain. After a long silence, she asked, Did she love you? He laughed bitterly. That's what makes it cruel. Ruth looked out at the land. When your father died,
she said softly. People brought food and pity. I hated the pity more. Pain is bad enough without being watched. Daniel swallowed. His mother grew quiet again. Then, because illness can be merciless in its timing, she looked at him with soft confusion and asked, "When's the wedding?" He closed his eyes. That almost broke him. Across town, Elena sat in the empty church with mascara on her fingers and her wedding dress wrinkled around her knees like a collapsed surrender. Victor stood near the front. "You could have told him privately," she said. "He deserved the truth before vows made the lie permanent." She looked up at him with raw fury. "You don't get to act righteous."
You sent me here. Victor's jaw tightened. I sent you to handle a project. You sent me to turn a family's grief into paperwork. I didn't know the local details. That's worse, she snapped. You built a life so large you stopped seeing the people under it. The words hung there. Victor said nothing. Elena laughed once, brokenly. Do you know why I stayed? It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't some rich girl fantasy about simplicity. It was because Daniel Reed is the first man I've ever met who made silence feel safer than promises. Victor looked at her. And for the first time in years, she did not soften for him. Mom begged you once, Elena said. She begged you to miss one deal and come home. Do you remember what you sent instead? Something moved in Victor's face. Flowers, Elena said. You sent flowers to her funeral. Victor looked away. That told her everything. A lawyer approached with a stack of papers. Victor took them, skimmed, then frowned. This debt packet, he said. Why is there a private mineral and water rights transfer attached? Elena stood. What? He handed it to her. She scanned the page and the color drained from her face. This wasn't in the original project file. Victor's voice dropped. Then someone continued after cancellation. Elena looked up. Cyrus. Victor turned to his legal team. Freeze every Bell-linked filing in this county. Tonight. Elena stared at him. He met her gaze. Whatever I failed to be as a father, he said quietly, I won't be the man who watches this become theft. Daniel spent that evening mending a fence that didn't need mending. Pain always needs busy hands. He worked until the sun bled out across the fields and the wire bit his palms. Then he heard footsteps. Elena stood by the gate in jeans and one of his old flannel shirts, the one he had wrapped around her shoulders during the first cold night of autumn. Seeing it on her hurt. You shouldn't be here, he said. I know. Then why are you? Because there are things I should have said before the world tore them out of me. He kept his eyes on the fence. She stepped closer anyway. I sold my shares 3 months ago. That made him look up. What? In my father's company. I used the money to delay the county process, hire independent counsel, and cover your mother's treatment when the clinic threatened to stop filling her prescriptions. Daniel stared at her. The Sunrise Foundation checks? He said. She nodded. He remembered them. Anonymous monthly payments, just enough to keep Ruth's medicine coming. He had asked everyone. No one knew. You had no right. I know. You should have told me. You would have sent it back. He hated that she was right. The wind moved through the dry grass. Elena wiped at her face. I did everything in the wrong order. I lied first. Then I loved you. Then I tried to fix it without confessing it. I know how ugly that is. Daniel looked at the fence posts between them. It sounds like a rich person's version of regret. She nodded once, tears gathering. Yes. He asked the question that had been poisoning him since the church. When you first saw me, he said, what did you see? She answered without hiding. At first, a target. He closed his eyes. But by the second day, I saw a man who skipped meals so his mother wouldn't. By the third, I saw someone who apologized when other people hurt him. By the end of the week, her voice broke. I saw someone so good, it made my whole life feel cheap. That hit somewhere deep. He wanted to forgive her. That was the problem. He wanted to. But trust does not regrow just because the heart begs it to. So he stepped back. And Elena knew what that meant. The next morning, the town square filled before sunrise. Cyrus Bell had moved the foreclosure auction there. Public humiliation was better business when other people could clap. Daniel arrived in a clean work shirt and old boots, with Ruth sitting in a folding chair under an elm tree because she had refused to stay home. Elena was nowhere in sight. Victor arrived with lawyers, investigators, and 3 of the black cars, but no showmanship now, just purpose. Cyrus climbed onto the platform in front of the courthouse and tapped the microphone. Good people, he said warmly. Today we conclude a regrettable but lawful transfer involving the Reed property. Stop! Everyone turned. Elena was walking through the crowd carrying a thick binder. No wedding dress, no makeup, no armor except truth. She climbed the platform steps. Cyrus smirked. Come to cry for the farm boy? She took the microphone from his hand. No, she said. I came to expose you. The crowd leaned in so hard it almost looked like one body. Elena opened the binder. For 3 years, Bell Holdings quietly targeted farms over the eastern water table. Not for agriculture, not for homes. For private bottling rights and off-record resale. Several acquisition packets used forged Beaumont authorizations after our corporate project had already been terminated. Whispers broke out everywhere. She held up maps, signatures, dates. Victor's lead attorney stepped forward with certified records. Then a county clerk in the crowd tried slipping away. 2 investigators caught him before he reached the sidewalk. Cyrus laughed too loudly. This is nonsense. Elena looked him dead in the eye. You buried a water rights transfer inside Daniel Reed's foreclosure file, inflated his debt with illegal penalties, and counted on one thing, that a poor man couldn't afford to find the truth before you stole his spring. Daniel felt the square change around him. People who had mocked him yesterday now looked sick. Cyrus lunged for the binder. Daniel moved before thought caught up. He caught Cyrus's wrist in midair. The crowd gasped. For 1 tense second, neither man moved. Cyrus red-faced and furious. Daniel silent and steady. Then Daniel spoke, low enough to chill the square. You've mistaken patience for weakness my whole life. Cyrus shoved him. Daniel barely shifted. Grant ran up the platform steps, face flushed. You think this changes anything? He still owes. Ruth's voice rose from below. No, he doesn't. The whole square turned. Daniel's mother stood slowly from her chair, one hand trembling on the armrest, but her eyes clear. Clear in the way they rarely were now. Daniel rushed toward her. Ma, I remember this, she said. He stopped.
Ruth climbed the platform step by step. The crowd parted for her. She reached into her cardigan pocket and removed an old folded receipt, worn at the edges from years of being hidden and handled. "This," she said into the microphone, "is the original payment schedule my husband signed after borrowing against the farm for our son's surgery." Daniel froze. His little brother Eli, 7 years old, buried in a suit too small because children should never need burial clothes. Ruth's voice shook, but she held the paper high. "We fell behind after we buried our child. Not because we were lazy, not because we were stupid, because grief makes poor people expensive to be." The square went dead. Cyrus barked, "She's confused." Ruth turned to him with sudden, terrifying clarity. "My memory comes and goes," she said. "My hatred for you has stayed very clear." A murmur spread. Victor's lawyer took the receipt, compared it against the current debt schedule, then looked at the investigators. The balance was altered, repeatedly. Grant's face drained white. Elena stepped beside Ruth and put a steadying hand at her back. Cyrus looked around and saw the town changing shape against him. That was the first time he looked frightened. "You people needed me," he snapped at the crowd. "I kept this county afloat." An old rancher near the front spat into the dust. "No, you kept us desperate." Investigators moved in. Cyrus backed away. "You can't arrest me here." Victor stepped onto the platform beside Daniel. "No," he said coldly, "but they can." And they did. In front of the whole town. The same square where Daniel was supposed to lose everything became the place Cyrus Bell was handcuffed in broad daylight, shouting that everyone was ungrateful, everyone was weak, everyone owed him. Nobody defended him. Grant tried, then stopped when he realized no one, not even the people who used to flatter his father, would meet his eyes. When the police cars pulled away, the town seemed quieter than Daniel had ever heard it, like a fever had broken. Victor turned to Daniel with the corrected file in his hand. "The foreclosure is suspended. Fraud review is underway. The farm remains yours." Daniel looked at the papers, but didn't take them yet. Instead, he looked at Elena. She stood a few feet away, exhausted, tear-streaked, hands still shaking from speaking in front of everyone who had laughed at her the day before. She had not saved herself. She had saved him. And somehow that made forgiving her harder, not easier. Because now, loving her again would cost pride, not just pain. He walked toward her. The square held its breath. Elena looked like a woman standing on the edge of her own sentence. "I'm still angry," Daniel said. "I know. I still hear the first lie louder than every truth after it. I know. I don't know how to trust you fast." Her lips trembled. "Then don't." That answer landed softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded paper packet. She frowned through tears. "What's that?" He placed it in her hand. "Tomato seeds," he said. Recognition cracked across her face. The first week she'd stayed at the farm, she had laughed at his kitchen window and said, "One day this place needs tomatoes in every pot, like somebody lives here on purpose." Daniel looked at the packet in her palm. "I can't promise we go back to what we were," he said. "But I know dead-looking ground isn't always dead. Sometimes it just needs honesty long enough." Elena covered her mouth and cried. Not politely, not attractively, not like the women in rich magazines. Like someone being offered 1 inch of mercy after fully deserving none. 3 weeks later, they married under the old oak tree on the Reed farm. No church, no spectacle, no people waiting for disaster. Just a handful of neighbors who had shown up after the auction with hammers, casseroles, lumber, and the awkward shame of people who knew they had once mistaken entertainment for justice. Ruth wore blue and cried before the ceremony even began. Victor arrived alone. No convoy this time. No wall of black cars announcing wealth before humanity. Just a man in a dark suit carrying a small velvet box. He found Daniel behind the barn before the ceremony. "I owe you something," Victor said.
"You owe your daughter more." Victor nodded. "I know." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, old. "Elena's mother wore this when we had almost nothing," he said. "Before I built an empire and forgot what it was costing me." Daniel studied him. For the first time, Victor Beaumont did not look powerful. He looked late. That was different. Daniel took the box, not because the ring was valuable, because Victor's hand shook while offering it. When Elena walked toward him beneath the oak tree, the sun came through the leaves in broken gold, and Daniel felt something settle in him that had been restless for weeks. Not certainty, something better. Choice. She stopped in front of him. No hidden name now, no secret file, no borrowed identity. Just Elena. Flawed, ashamed, brave enough to stay. The pastor smiled. "Daniel, do you?" "I do," Daniel said immediately. Laughter rippled through the gathering. Even Elena laughed through tears. "I do too," she whispered, and when he slid her mother's ring onto her finger, she gasped and looked toward Victor. He didn't speak. He simply nodded. And for the first time in years, the distance between father and daughter looked less like a wall and more like a wound finally beginning to close. After the kiss, the applause sounded nothing like the church laughter. This sound had warmth in it, relief, humility, the trembling joy of people who had watched something nearly die and live anyway. Later that night, when the guests were gone and the lanterns had burned low, Daniel and Elena stood together at the kitchen window, pressing tomato seeds into fresh soil. The house was quiet. The farm was quiet. Ruth was asleep down the hall. Elena leaned against him and asked softly, "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing everything?" Daniel looked out over the moonlit fields. The land his father had died for. The land his mother had refused to surrender. The land a greedy man had almost stolen by disguising hunger as law. Then he looked at the woman beside him. "No," he said. She looked up. "No?" He touched her hand, the one still dusted with soil. "I think about how everything worth keeping usually has to survive the moment it almost doesn't. And maybe that was the part the whole town got wrong from the beginning. They thought this story was about a poor farmer marrying above his station. It wasn't. It was about a man the world considered small, proving impossible to buy. A woman raised in luxury, learning that love without truth is just another transaction. And a father arriving in 20 luxury cars only to discover the most valuable thing waiting for him wasn't wealth, power, or land. It was the dignity of a man who could be humiliated in public, betrayed at the altar, nearly robbed of everything his family had built, and still refused to let pain turn him cruel. So tell me honestly, if you were Daniel, would you have forgiven her?